So fortunately, we still have some wonderful graces that God gives us.
God does not leave us bereft. We have graces. And the first grace that we'd like to talk about today is the grace of forgiveness. Forgiving frees us from past hurts and cleanses us of resentments. Just as God forgives us in the sacrament of reconciliation, we must forgive each other. But forgiving should never be merely perfunctory. We must work hard not to retain resentment. When we forgive our spouse, we must let go of that hurt forever, just as God pardons us in the sacrament of reconciliation. We should not store up a past hurt. Until we can let it go, we cannot really forgive each other.
And so that's the thing, forever. So if you're not ready to forgive, don't do it. I mean, I'm a critical guy, extrovert, big mouth, and we even did this with our kids. And it's kind of humbling when I've screwed. I still screw up, but when I screwed up, and got too critical with our 10-year-old son, and I'd say, "Lincoln, do you forgive me?" And he'd look up and say, "No," because he wasn't ready to forgive me. We have to be ready, because then we can let it go and we're not store it up.
The second grace that God gives us is the grace of affirmation, or the grace of elevation. And that doesn't mean that we are floating spirits, nor that we hit the ceiling when we're angry. The grace of elevation or affirmation is the special infusion of God's blessing that comes when we affirm each other. When Charlie tells me, "You are really a neat lady," my spirits soar. I realize he's not praising me for something that I'm doing, but he's praising me for who I am.
Another grace we have, as we've referred to, is the grace of parenting. Our children are our love running around with a name on them. They teach us how to love, they teach us how to sacrifice, they teach us how to have humility, and they teach us how to grow wiser, and they're cool. Why don't you do that one?
In our society, this is the next grace, the grace of our sexual relationship. In our society, sex and intimacy are thought synonymous, and that's not true. Sex means intimacy, and intimacy means sex. But instead, intimacy means the sharing of our deepest selves with each other. The sacrament of matrimony provides us the grace to attain that intimacy when we are properly disposed to experience and receive that grace. To God, sex is an important, essential block of our sacrament. Sex is holy.
Let me repeat, sex is holy.
But only when the physical act of love is intertwined with romance and attachment. We romance each other every single day, all the time, by touching, giving gifts, affirming each other, spending quality time together. We increase our attachment to each other by doing household chores, parenting, affirming each other, listening, and forgiving.
The Pope calls it 1,000 little gestures. 1,000 might be a bit of an exaggeration, but they're all little things we do for each other every day.
And last but not least, God gives us the grace of Christian community. In a sacramental marriage, we have many joyous, spiritual moments, but inevitably we face challenges as well. We marry for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, for richer, for poorer. Sharing our ups and downs with others who share our Christian values helps us to weather our trials and celebrate our joys. In Christian community, we are never alone. An example of Christian community in our lives happened when our dear daughter, three years ago, she died. Her many surgeries had weakened her body.
So we have, our Christian community really helped to support us during that time and love us and, lift us up and pray with us. And because she was an amazing girl. We know where she is, but we also still really miss her. So Christian community is, being with people of similar values and talking about what's important. Another way we can be a sacrament is actually being together at a social function. I know before we went on a weekend, I'd head off with the guys, Marty with the girls, and we'd maybe meet to go home. The other neat thing about community is we're all on a spectrum and we're all experiencing different things. And so one of the things you experience obviously is sometimes illness, but also your parents aging. And going through that together, seeing where other people are at. I remember we've been in a sharing group for many years, and they were talking about how their teenage children were so hard to take care of and so problematic. And I kept thinking, that'll never happen when Heidi becomes a teenager. Heidi is nice and kind and sweet, and it's like the day she turned 13, she metamorphosed into a monster. But we were a bit prepared for it because people had told us this was going to happen. I didn't believe it, but they told us it was going to happen. So Christian community, finding them and making that your bedrock is important.
Okay, do we have time for the question?
No.
Okay. What we want you to do is take home. We don't have time for it today, but we do have a question for you to talk about. What married couples that you know embody the sacrament of matrimony, a living sign of God's love? Think about that. Talk to each other about that later on. What couples in your life are life-giving? What makes you feel energized and reminds you of God's love?
And just to wrap up, thank you so much, as Father said, for making this commitment.